This is our fourth presentation in this season. This is our third season with the 19th Century Baseball Speaker Series, an invention of Bob Bailey's, to kind of pick up the pace for the pandemic. And it worked very well. And it was a something that we thought was well received, and got a lot of good feedback on it. We continued it. So every year we've been going about soliciting research presentations to be given virtually here on the 19th Century Baseball Speaker Series. Sometime probably around February, possibly March, Bob and I again will put out a call for abstracts for the next season. And we run it, of course, like on an academic year. It's September through May, and it's 9 presentations on the first Tuesday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, that's much to say about the series. Much to say also, we have a very fantastic Frederick Ivor Campbell 19th Century Baseball Conference in the works. It'll be in the winter issue of our newsletter around January 1st, and it'll be all the details of the conference and some new surprises, both in the programming and the environment. We will still be at the Hall of Fame, of course, but we've had some catering issues that we had to get past, and I think we've succeeded beyond our expectations. So it'll be exciting again. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Bob now, who'll say a few words about our rules of the game when it comes to the 19th Century Speaker Series, and a few words about this evening's speaker.
Thank you, Peter. Just a quick reminder to all, please mute yourself when the presentation starts, so we'll keep any ambient background noise. If you have a question or a comment in the course of the talk, please use the chat function. Just run your cursor down to the bottom of the black screen, Zoom screen, hit chat. If you don't have a chat button showing, just move to the right. It'll have more with a couple of dots. Click that and chat should show up in there. When you click it, a screen will appear on the right, and at the bottom of that screen is a place for you to type questions and comments, which we will go through and address to the speaker after he's done with the presentation. And tonight's speaker is Dan Linnenberg. Dan's a highly educated man with more degrees than a thermometer. He's a retired counseling therapist and Episcopal clergy member. He spends considerable time with various Red Cross missions, having recently come from South Florida, working with the communities hit by Hurricanes Ian and Nicole. On the baseball front, he's a inveterate visitor of minor league ballparks and traveling around the country to attend games and collect information and just to see the ambiance of what's going on around the country. He is presented at the Cooperstown Symposium on Baseball and American Culture and other venues. Tonight, his topic is Long John Reilly, ball player and artist. So Dan, let's get your slides up there and hit the screen share, and we'll be off and running.
Okay, does everybody see that?
Not yet. It's not
showing
yet.
Up. Hang on. Okay, let's see. I forgot to hit that button.
There it comes.
There it goes. Okay.
You're good. Just one note before I sign off here during the presentation. If you want to, you should probably, if you've got up in the corner, there's a thing that says view. If you click that and put it on speaker, you will only see Dan. over there. Otherwise, you'll see a little film strip of yourself, Dan, and others, and sometimes it bleeds into the slide. So do it the way you feel most comfortable. And Dan, it's all yours.
Okay, as long as everybody can see the slides, I'm happy. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you about a subject that has become very dear to my heart. It's sort of been my retirement project, is the research on John G. Long John Reilly. Okay, hang on. There we go. This quest sort of started back in 2004. While perusing the Cincinnati art galleries, we came across this etching by Edward Hurley, a Cincinnati artist who was one of the many fine artists working for the Rookwood Pottery Company. Hurley was also known for his etchings of Cincinnati scenes. This particular etching that you're looking at is of Hurley's friend and fellow artist and ex-baseball player Long John Reilly that was done while they were out on a sketching excursion. Most people may be aware of Long John Reilly's career. He spent 10 years in the major leagues, all with Cincinnati, and that included 1880 and then 1883 to 1891. His career was fairly impressive. He had a lifetime batting average of 289, and with 5 of those years where it was a 300 or higher. But what he's best known for was 2 accomplishments. He was the first and still one of only 4 players to hit for the cycle 3 times in his career. And second was his ability to hit triples. He had a career total of 139 triples in a 10-year career, with 1890 being his best individual year with a total of 26, leading the National League. John Reilly also had a career as a lithographer or a commercial artist. This particular slide that you're looking at is just a general slide showing a Barnum and Bailey Greatest Show on Earth poster. We have no idea whether Reilly worked on this per se, but it is an example of the type of work that came out of the Strobridge lithography company. At the age of 14, he started playing organized baseball. This was also the time that his mother contracted with Strobridge Lithography Company for John to become an apprentice. Reilly went on to play amateur and semi-pro baseball with local teams such as the Emmett Greens and the Mohawk Browns before becoming a professional major league ball player. During this time, he also continued his career as a professional lithographer, having his 2 passions intersect. Early on, the intersection of baseball and art was apparent in Reilly's work as an artist with his first sketchbook under the auspices of Strobridge. Reilly, as an apprentice lithography artist, was allowed to work on projects that were useful or important to him. For instance, the sketchbook reflected his relationship with his older brother, Charles, in that it included examples of drafts and final products of advertisements for Charles's engraving business in Louisville, Kentucky. The top one is a draft of the working process done on onion paper, and the bottom is a copy of the finished product. The sketchbook also contained advertisements for baseball teams such as the Emmett Greens, as seen here, and the Cincinnati Resolute baseball team, as seen here. In 1877, with his apprenticeship completed, Reilly joined the Strobridge Company as a black ink artist, initially specializing in letterwork, meaning that he was drawing the advertising copy, the words, mainly with the circus poster department. As Reilly's artistic career was moving ahead, his baseball prowess was likewise developing. In 1878, he was playing with one of the premier amateur semi-professional teams, the Mohawk Browns. Here he was covering left and center field with occasional field manager responsibilities. The following year, 1879, he was playing with the semi-professional team, the Cincinnati Stars, on Sunday afternoon games. Reilly's entrance into prominence in professional baseball was enhanced by his participation in the Cincinnati Buffalo baseball exhibition trip to the West Coast in the fall of 1879. There are two stories about how he was convinced it was a good idea to go. In January 1909, a story was published about former Cincinnati artist Frank Garridin, which relayed the story of how Garridin and Reilly were out on a sketching excursion, and Reilly mentioned to Garridin that he had been offered the substitute position for the trip. Garridin had played some ball as a right fielder with both the Emmett Greens and Mohawk Browns, urged Reilly to take the trip because he knew Reilly would make his mark as a great baseball player. In a news story in May of 1921, Reilly reminisced about joining the 1879 exhibition team, and his decision was clinched by the fact that it was a, quote, great opportunity to see the country and do some sketching in the West. This was underscored by the fact that he held on to these cherished sketches for some 42 years. There's also another explanation on why he went to California to begin with and did not return to Cincinnati until December 29th, 1879, being one of the last ones to return, was that his grandfather, John Good, and his family lived in San Francisco and Santa Rosa, so it is assumed that Reilly spent some time while visiting. This was the same grandfather who he spent some time with in the late 1860s in Moline, Illinois. A later story relays how he lost his, in these stories, excuse me, lost my spot there. There we go. The Reilly's recognition as an artist was not widely acknowledged until January 1882, when a story came out about Reilly and a sketchbook that was lost at sea when he was aboard the SS Narragansett when the SS Stonington collided with the Narragansett 18 months earlier. Most know the story of from the newspapers of the time of the tragic accident that occurred in June of 1880. Reilly was traveling from New York to Providence to meet up with the team. After the accident, he assisted passengers by passing out life jackets and assisting people into lifeboats. There is one touching story where he attempted to break down a door to help people escape. However, too much water had gotten into the boat that he could not open up the door and had to abandon that effort. It is said he spent about a couple of hours in the water waiting to be rescued. It's in these later news stories that he is identified for the first time as an artist. Also, a later story relays how he lost his art portfolio in this horrible accident and how it was eventually returned to him, and the exchanges between him and the founder who had expressed her appreciation of his artistic talents. When the young woman, a Miss Lamb, found the sketchbook, she had the desire to keep it, but found a business card inside it. So she sent the sketchbook with a note expressing her appreciation of the artistic talent. It appears that the card in the book was for Reilly's brother Charles in Louisville, who returned it to John on his next visit to Cincinnati. In appreciation of the note and the return of the sketches, he selected and sent Miss Lamb one of his paintings with a note. The surprise was another note from Miss Lamb expressing her thanks and a slight shock that Reilly had sent her a painting of her alma mater. Unfortunately, the correspondence and possible romance fizzled because her return letter was mishandled and did not arrive to Reilly for about 6 months. Here we see the picture of Reilly in the 1882 season when he was playing with the Metropolitan baseball team. The stories about Reilly and the possible romance with Miss Lamb ended with the announcement that Reilly was going off to New York to play the 1882 season with the Metropolitans. Years later, Reilly reminisced about the decision to go to New York in the winter of 1881 and 1882. He had been approached by officials of the New York team about playing first base for them. He met with them after he conferred with the artistic manager at Strobridge, Matt Morgan, who encouraged him to take the offer because it would help Reilly as an artist. He continued his relationship with Strobridge, working out of the New York office in the mornings and playing in the afternoon with the Mets. He considered his time with the Strobridge New York office as one of his best artistic training opportunities, to the point that he wanted to stay there. It was trickery, as he stated, quote, "Promises that were made to me were afterward ignored, and I was forced to play here in Cincinnati or not at all," end of quote. He continued, quote, "By coming here, I lost a great opportunity for an advancement in my trade," end of quote. Reilly's reputation as an artist outside of his own sketching and his role as an employee with Strobridge focused more on the humorous side with his cartoons and caricatures. It started with a report of a cartoon in April of 1883 that was hanging on the wall of the baseball club's office. The cartoon, entitled "Don't Sign Till You See Me," shows the picture of a manager talking to a player. Reilly was identified as the artist. However, the cartoon was not published until after the famed Fulmer and Cramps character was published. This particular drawing shows Charles John Chick Fulmer, the Cincinnati shortstop. It was reported in July of 1883 game in Columbus, which was delayed 25 minutes because Chuck Fulmer was sick. The game was able to start when Carpenter arrived from Cincinnati, having taken a later train. It was discovered later that it was a scam on Fulmer's part. Since Carpenter was not present when the game was scheduled to begin, Cincinnati was going to have to forfeit the game. Rules allowed a delay for sick players, so Fulmer pretended to have cramps, acting as if he had cholera. They tried treating him with brandy and even ginger, but after Carpenter arrived in uniform, the whole team, including Fulmer, took the field. Cincinnati lost 6-1. In 1883, caricatures and cartoons became a semi-regular thing after the Fulmer and Cramps was published. These are examples of Reilly's cartoons and characters that appeared in the Commercial Gazette in 1883. This is a copy of the 1883 Cincinnati Baseball Club scorecard. We know some things, and there are other things we don't know about Reilly's baseball-related lithography work. We do know that there was a life-size 7-foot by 10-foot poster of the team, but we don't know whether Reilly was the artist or not. We do know that Reilly's cartoon was to be on the score face on August 7th, 1883, and also that Reilly designed the scorecard for August 11th and 12th. That the scorecards will start on those particular, it was noted in that the upcoming team for 1884 would be listed starting in September 29th, of which this is a copy. So this particular copy came about in September, but we're not sure. We don't know if this etching of Steel Up was by Reilly or not. Thus, we have no means to definitively state that if any or some of this card is the work of John Reilly, but there's always a possibility. What we have here is the 1884 baseball card. What we do know is that Reilly was responsible for the 16-sheet advertisement of the team was of Reilly's descent. And when I say a 16-sheet, I better back up some. When you're dealing with lithography and posters, they generally come in about 24-inch by 48 inches, but they can be expanded, and you have several posters on top of each other or next to each other that give you a fuller picture. And so this particular 16-sheet advertisement had 16 sheets all connected together, had a picture of the entire team. One of the interesting things is that when it is generally known within the lithography business that when somebody gets a contract to do one thing, they usually get the contract to do everything. However, other than Reilly being on the front cover of a few of the editions of the particular scorecard, again, we have no idea whether he had any connection to this particular scorecard or not. Continuing on, in the 1884, his characters and cartoons continued on a semi-regular basis. And these are examples of Reilly's cartoons and characters that appear in the Commercial Gazette of 1884. In 1885, the characters and cartoons stopped being published on a regular basis. And it was in July of 1885 that another story of Reilly's abilities as a fine artist appeared in the Chicago Tribune. The author was talking about how he and another person were on the road heading to Cincinnati when they came upon an artist sketching an ivy-covered cottage. They asked to see what the person was drawing, which they described as a, quote, a perfect picture of the scene, end of quote. It wasn't until later, when they were attending the Cincinnati versus Athletics game, did they recognize the player as the artist that they had come across earlier. They asked a local who the player was, and the response was, quote, "That's Long John Reilly, der boss first baseman," end of quote. From 1886 until 1888, stories about Reilly as an artist were limited to occasional statements that Reilly was working during the off-season at Strobridge. The thing that brought out Reilly's character talents again was his and the entire Cincinnati team's interaction with umpire Herm Dozier, which started in early June of 1888 when Dozier fined 4 players a total of $55, 3 of them were from Cincinnati, for not obeying the umpire, and stated that if he had heard what Reilly had supposedly said about that fining, Dozier would have fined him $100. Articles appeared throughout the summer commenting on Dozier's bad and rank umpiring. And in early September, a story came out that the manager believed that Cincinnati had lost at least 12 games due to Dozier, and that he was particularly unfair with McPhee, Reilly, and Nickel. Reilly got his revenge with this caricature of Dozier's calls. In November of 1889, John Reilly opened a part-time lithography design business with an unknown partner. Due to a change on how gate receipts were split with the visiting clubs in the National League, the Cincinnati club decided they were going to have, quote, "the Reds build next season like a circus," end of quote. Reilly was the one handling the design of the advertising posters of all the players, including a life-size 3-sheet poster of Hugh Nickel, which would fully include Nickel's 5'4", 145-pound frame. These posters were to be plastered all over National League cities prior to a game series in each of them. However, at least one additional item was done by Reilly for the Reds, but was not identified by the local press. The item was what you see here is the 1890 Cincinnati Baseball Club scorecard. Starting in the 1880s, it was not unusual for the design artist of a piece of lithographic art to sign his or her work as one does with any piece of artwork. As you can see in this particular scorecard, one can see in the lower left corner of the center panel of the front of the card, John Reilly's standard artistic signature. This indicates that he was the designer of the project and most likely the primary black ink artist, and most likely also the color artist. You can see the significant similarities between the card signature and other Reilly signatures from one of his pencil sketches and one from a lithographic art poster. Then we come to the 1895 Cincinnati baseball card. This is not signed by Reilly, but this product has significant provenance. In December of 1894, in the Enquirer, they wrote that manager Bancroft wanted a new and different scorecard and had asked Reilly to take on the project. In January of 1895, the Enquirer stated that Reilly was designing an original cut for the outside of the front cover of the book. And then finally, in April 15th, 1895, the Cincinnati Post sports writer Men Munford describes the card with an illuminated baseball sketch by Long John Reilly, with portraits of the club officers and the picture of the grandstand, and a page group of the 5 baseball scribes of Cincinnati, which included Mumford. The interesting little secret of the 1895 scorecard, which may reflect John Reilly's passive-aggressive behavior, but however we could not find any mention of the fact, is that there is no first baseman in the grandstand sketch. It could have been left out because of John's possible grudge about being unceremoniously released at the end of the 1891 season and replaced by Comiskey, or a continued grudge about treatment from 1883 and his well-known avoidance of going to games except for benefits and celebration games, or a combination of these. Now we come to Reilly in the Cincinnati art scene. Reilly played his final year in 1891 and announced his retirement from baseball in July of 1892. He had already turned his focus to his fine artwork besides his continuing employment at Strobridge. He had already joined the ranks of the Cincinnati Art Club as an active professional member in January of 1892. The club forming in October of 1890 with 14 original members, including one dog. They were superstitious about having only 13 members when they started. The club would include sketching classes and social events and became the focal point of local artists promoting and selling their artwork to the public through art shows, exhibitions, and tambolas, which was a form of a raffle. Reilly was active in that he participated not only in the social aspects of the art club, such as being a member of the art club's band. It should be noted that it was reported that he had a fine singing voice. He also played the guitar, banjo, and there are some hints that he also played the tuba. On numerous occasions, he was the member of the club's hanging committee. These people decide what will be shown in an art show, besides being a judge for some of the shows. He was also elected as a club board member in 1970. It should be noted that Reilly came from a family of artists. We can see here at the top piece is an example of his brother Charles's work from when he was in Louisville. And the bottom one is another one of the cards that John had done in his original sketchbook to sort of advertise his brother's engraving and print shop. Also, another artist, John Reilly's Aunt Josephine, or Aunt Josie, who was in California, also made her living as a fine artist. We primarily want to address John Reilly's life as a landscape artist and a member of the Cincinnati art community. Here is Reilly with other members of the Cincinnati Art Club. The thing I would like to point out with this particular picture, we believe that's Reilly on the upper left side, standing much taller than everybody else in the picture. The other thing that we would like to point out is the artist in a vest, sort of in the group of in the middle with that mustache, if you can sort of see him there. That's Frank Duveneck, and Duveneck was considered the finest artist in Cincinnati and was an instructor for many of the artists who became known as the Duveneck Boys. That's not to say that Duveneck didn't train women, but at that time and time frame, it was mostly men that he was training. He did train such fine women artists as Bessie Wessel and a few others. This particular one is an example of one of John's lithographic examples that he did for the art club. And the art club would sponsor events, and members would take turns doing artistic endeavors to advertise the events. This is one of Reilly's contributions that became the front cover of the 1897 Bazaar brochure. What we're going into now is some of the sketches and paintings that John Reilly did as an artist. And what I'm going to talk about as we go through these, you can read the name of what each is entitled. I'm going to read you some reviews of some of his other artwork because it was commented on fairly regularly by the press in the Cincinnati area. It should be noted that on numerous occasions, positive reviews were given about Reilly's work as an artist. Though, as you listen to the comments about his artwork, they sound incongruent to his athletic abilities and his physical presence. Reilly was mainly a landscape artist who did mostly pictures known as thumb box pictures, small pictures which were generally less than 12 by 8 inches and could fit into a paint box that could also hold the paper, pencils, crayons, and watercolors, or whatever was needed. The boxes had a single ring attached by which the artist could hold onto the box with their thumb as they painted the picture. Talking about Reilly's exhibition in 1919 of about 103 of his landscapes, thumb box landscapes, the reviewer said, quote, "John G. Reilly's little landscapes are always a revelation. One has the feeling of large pictures done on a small scale rather than small pictures. Many of Long John's little sketches will be found on the walls of studies about time, and no better compliment could be given." Now, to back up a little, if you remember that picture of the art club that I showed you and pointed out Frank Duveneck, who was considered the best artist in the Cincinnati community. For just an example, about 30 years ago, I had an opportunity to buy one of Duveneck's paintings because it was for sale and it was right there in front of me. But unfortunately, I didn't have the $1 million to pay for it. So I passed on it. Saying that, Duveneck was known to have owned 2 of Reilly's paintings. And John considered that the greatest compliment that he ever got about his artwork was that Frank Duveneck owned 2 of his paintings. This is another one of his paintings known as Bend in the River, but I want to talk about a review that he received from in a 1901 painting called Road to the Dairy. And it was mentioned in the review of the art show that particular time as, quote, amongst the most important works of the entire show. Here's one of his sketches known as Fishing Shacks. And though there was another quote from the 1919 show that Reilly's work showed, quote, truly poetic charm, end of quote. Here's Chicken Coop. Other mentions about some of his work stated were such things as, quote, distinctive charm, end of quote. And then probably one of the ones I like the most, which was, quote, delicate and sweet, end of quote. Here we're seeing a painting called Along the River. In 1915, he received a review of one of his works, one of his watercolors. And the reviewer said, quote, his tenderly accented watercolors, end of quote, were absolutely amazing. They just stood out in the show. What I'm going to show you next is an interesting thing. This is the 1894 Tambola. And one of the many ways that the art club raised money was with their annual Tambola raffle. Now, each member would donate a painting or 2 to the club, and each club member then would sell tickets to family and friends. But generally, they only sold a finite number of tickets based on the number of paintings donated plus 1. Thus, each ticket holder would win a painting by a club member. The plus 1 would get the grand prize, which was referred to as the Tambola. In many cases, it was a painting on which a number of members would paint on a single canvas. Only 2 of these paintings are still known to exist. One hangs in the Cincinnati Art Museum, and the other, this one, the 1894, where Reilly was one of the artists, is part of a private collection. Now, the part that Reilly did, if you look at the palette, you look off to the far right, the painting, the little painting in the sort of the rectangle, which sort of reflects a sunset over water with trees on the far right, is the part that's done by John Reilly. Some of the other artists that participated in this one is Henry Farney, who is probably still also considered one of the best painters of Native American scenes. His paintings are currently hanging in the White House in the National Gallery, and supposedly he was also Theodore Roosevelt's favorite artist. We also have John Reddick and Martin Reddick in here, who are 2 fairly well-known Cincinnati artists, besides a few others on this. Just for everybody's, this was sold several years ago to the private collectors, and it went for over $50,000. Not to say all of John Reilly's paintings end up being that expensive. Reilly always saw himself first and foremost as an artist. In the 60+ years of Cincinnati city directories, Reilly listed himself as an artist, engraver, lithographer, and or designer 59 times as compared to the 4 times he was listed as a baseball player. What can be said, this particular picture of Reilly, done by one of the paper artists, was done in a article talking about Strobridge, that they had artists who stuck around for a fairly long time. And it noted that John Reilly had over 53 years with Strobridge. The interesting thing about it was that this particular article came out in 1925, which was still about 7 years before he retired. So he had a very long career with Strobridge. In a sense, in conclusion, what we came to and follow the most, that John Reilly perceived and dedicated himself first and foremost as an artist, and secondarily as a baseball player. Though in everything he did so with dedication and passion. I sort of want to close there, but I am going to go through a few more pictures that just sort of show the depth and breadth of some of Reilly's artwork that he did. And this is the final one. This particular painting, it's an untitled landscape. It's only about 9 by 7 painting, and this was the last thing that I saw come up for auction. Unfortunately, I didn't see that coming up for auction until 1 month after it had sold, which was very disappointing to me, because I've been trying to keep track, seeing if I can find any more examples of John Reilly's work. I pointed out that the Tambola went for $50,000. This particular picture went for about $117. So that's sort of the end of the formal presentation. I am more than happy to answer questions about Reilly. There is a boatload more of information that I have stored away in my mind and in my research project, which is surrounding me all over the place. And ask me any question, not only about Reilly's art, but also about John Reilly himself. Thank you.
Well, Dan, thank you. It's a fascinating story with the career he had, not only as a ball player, but also as an artist while he was a ball player, and his training and all those sorts of things. Let me ask you, we had a question early from Peter Mancuso concerning the 1895 scorecard that he worked on. It had the officers on one page.
Yeah.
And
the scribes on the other,
right.
page.
But he asked if in 1895 if Bancroft was the manager. Now Ian Braun responded right after that according to Baseball Reference it was Buck Ewing, but we've had a number of references that wherever Bancroft went, he was manager a lot of times. Yeah. But he's not going to fight off Buck Ewing.
No.
But he was listed as, I think, as business manager on that page. Was that his role in 1895?
As I understand it, yeah. I mean, you know, he sort of handled those things that would be related to what Reilly was doing as an artist, as I understand it. You know, it's so. Yeah, in that sense, I don't remember ever seeing him as quote unquote the field manager, but more as the business manager.
Yeah, he would travel with him because he took care of the money.
Yeah,
and that's what. But do you would think that he commissioned Reilly to do that? Because that would be his job.
Yeah, that was within the purview of his job, was to commission. They wanted something different. He wanted something different. And so he asked Reilly to do the 1895. Interestingly enough, that the example that was in the Hall of Fame, which we showed you, it was through our research and finding that provenance that basically, which was just absolutely amazing, saying he was asked to do it, he was going to do it, and then a great description of what it was, fits to the T, the actual scorecard. The Baseball Hall of Fame changed the description of their item to reflect that it was artwork by Reilly. Likewise, currently they're reviewing our submission about the 1890 scorecard, that having Reilly's signature indicates that he had that contract too, so that the 1890. So they're looking at our research right now to see if they're going to change that. As about a week ago, it still hadn't been changed, but it's one of those things we sort of try to stay on top of.
On a personal note, in our audience, Pam Baker notes that when Reilly was playing for the Metropolitans, it was her great grandfather who was the official scorer for the club. And so if anybody has any arguments over that safe and out call and that error call in the third inning, call Pam. Some nice notes on the remarkable presentation and the research that goes into these things.
Yeah.
But there was a question about if there was anything about his personal life. Was he married? Did he have descendants? I noticed that one of the owners of one of the pictures was Reilly hyphenated name. Was that a family connection?
Not that I know of. The hyphenated name that was on there was my wife's name.
No, it was in the middle of the.
In the middle someplace.
It was an acknowledgement of who owned it, or it was who gave permission to.
Okay.
To use the. But do you know anything about his
yeah, he was a lifelong bachelor. And basically lived with his mother until his mother died in 1911 on Stanley Avenue in Cincinnati. Most people know that he spent some time on Kilgore Avenue, which is sort of at the base of Mount Adams in Cincinnati. His sketchbook had his address as 98 Kilgore Street. But the family moved out to the far east side of Cincinnati in what is known as the Columbia area, and lived on Stanley Avenue basically from about 1879 until his death in 1937. But he never married. The closest thing that we have found about Reilly in his love life was that letter exchange with Miss Lamb, who was basically from the Mystic Groton area of Connecticut. And there was one other article that he was sort of he and another couple and another young woman were out in a rowboat on the Ohio River. And that's where he was singing and playing the guitar. So those are the only two stories about any romance that we have found with him. But he was just a lifelong bachelor. Smoked a 5-cent cigar every day.
Maurice Bouchard notes that John Thorne had a blog post on Reilly from in 2017 that includes several images that Reilly did, and he gave us a link. So if any of the audience wants to go to the chat, they can click on that and see that blog post. Yeah,
that's the life of, I think it's titled The Life of Reilly. And John shows 3 pictures that he bought from the Cincinnati Art Galleries, the same place that we got that Hurley picture of John Reilly. I tried contacting him to see if I could get permission to use his pictures, but never heard back from him. So, and the such. So, I mean, it was just, it's one of those things. there's a lot of sort of factoids that we have about John Reilly. You were mentioning Buck Ewing. The story goes that John basically was the one to convince somebody that they should get Buck Ewing to play for them, and that was the start of Buck Ewing's career. But it should also be noted that John Reilly was a pallbearer for Buck Ewing's brother, John.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. He was also an honorary pallbearer for Frank Duveneck. He was one of the people representing the Cincinnati Art Club at Duveneck's funeral.
Well, certainly the Ewings and the Rileys were Cincinnati natives. So,
Yes.
or at least communities. Dixie Toronto has a question. How did Mrs. Lamb find or get a hold of the sketchbook from the maritime accident?
It washed ashore.
Was it wet? Was it?
Oh yeah, it was
drippable?
wet. It was damaged. She could still see some of the sketches inside the book or in the portfolio. She picked it up. As the story says, she wanted to keep it. She just had this desire because she liked the artwork. But because she found the card, she decided she needed to return it. And so supposedly wrote a very lovely letter complimenting John Reilly on his art, and he just decided to send her one. And unbeknownst to anybody, it happened to be her alma mater. Supposedly when she was in school in Worcester, Mass. But she lived on the shore in the Groton Mystic area of Connecticut, and that was sort of one of those rabbit holes we went down trying to see if we could find the actual Miss Lamb, any record of her whatsoever. But Lamb is a very popular name in that part of the country. So we could never really identify anybody based on what facts we had about her, to see if we could find somebody else who might have some Reilly paintings available.
There's a question from Peter Mancuso here. Do we know if John Reilly and Bob Carruthers interacted as artists?
Not that I know of. That is not a name I have run across doing research solely on John Reilly. Okay. This particular quest has sort of sometimes leads me to other ideas of researching other baseball players who may also be artists. We sort of discovered Waite Schoolboy Hoyt was an artist, and a few others. And speaking of art, there was a movement a number of years ago while Reilly was still active that they were going to try to form a National Museum of Baseball Art. And Reilly had been asked to sort of be a part of that or a board member or something like that, but we could not find anything where that ever came to fruition. It was just one of those articles in passing.
Pam Baker asked, did any of his drawings or artwork end up in the New York Herald or any New York-based paper?
Not that I can recall. His time in New York when he was playing for the Mets, he was working all the time on the Strobridge circus posters, and that was a huge part of his life. Part of the problem is we have yet to be able to find a draft of a circus poster or a circus poster with his signature on it, or a working product from Strobridge, which usually listed the various artists on a project. We have yet to find anything with John Reilly's name on it. There are numerous articles about how, when the circus owners would come into Cincinnati to see what was going on with their advertising, would stand behind John Reilly in utter amazement, because he was a lithographer, which means they painted the picture on the stone, okay, on the rock, this flat sheet. They would paint the picture, and the black artist would do the outline. And his specialty was words, or the lettering. He was a primary letter artist, and the articles talk about how these circus owners would just stand there in amazement, seeing John Reilly, since he's writing on the stone that's going to be what it's printed off to, is moving and drawing all these things, all these words backwards with such speed, it utterly amazed everybody.
Maybe I could have been a lithographer, because I always got bad penmanship grades when I was in school. But nevertheless, Dan, thank you so much. The slides were quite striking, and very interesting to see the not only Reilly's, but even the artwork of the era.
Yeah,
that's going on. We thank you for everything, and if you would take down all your slides down, we'll get back to the normal view. Peter, if you'd like to close us off.
Okay. Dan, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm still getting some chats acknowledging it. Woody Eckford just sent something in, also saying how great it was. I also want to thank you for all of your service to people in crisis and chaos, and the American Red Cross and so forth. I have a family member, daughter-in-law, who has done that kind of work. So I kind of know what it's about.
It's about. It's that retirement thing that I always wanted to do. I've been with the Red Cross about 13 years now. And just in my retirement, I've been able to do these deployments to go off to various parts of the country to just give what assistance I can. So
okay, good for you, and good for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Peter, I have a question for
sure,
Dan.
Mitch.
It's okay. Yeah, Dan. Very good presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed the whole thing. Did he ever? I mean, it sounds like he said it, but did he ever sell his artwork or paintings for profit? Well, and if he did, what was the most he ever got for any of his paintings?
Yes, he did. As I mentioned, the art club would have these sales and the such every year, and he would generally have something 2, 3, 4, 6 paintings in the brochures. Looking at the brochures for each of these art shows or bazaars or whatever, various artists had various listings, and John was not necessarily the most expensive, but he really sort of kept his own with a lot of these artists. The one figure that comes off to my mind at the top of my head, I think, was $60. But you're talking in the 1890s, early 1900s.
You mentioned something that whole with the palette with the 10 artists, I went for like $60,000. That was pretty impressive.
Well, that went for $50,000 just a couple of years ago. The person who originally won it probably won it for $10.
Okay, thank you.
The other interesting thing, they had one in 1901, and the person that won the Tambola, we don't know what it was, they also won a John Reilly. That particular person bought 2 tickets, and he got a John Reilly out of it. So
that Tambola only sold for $50,000 a couple of years ago. I'm surprised it didn't go for more than that.
No, it's art fluctuates between what people want and
I know, supply and demand. I know.
It's like, I mentioned that Duveneck that I could have bought for $1 million. My wife wouldn't let me buy one. He was fairly well known for portraits. Duveneck was known for portraits. There was one of an inside of a church that I could have gotten for $5,000, but my wife wouldn't let me do that one either.
Thank God for wives.
Great, thank you.
Well, let me wrap off by saying we're going to be, of course, returning a month from now on almost exactly, well, January 10th, with John Popovich. I'd be doing a presentation that was based on his presentation in Cooperstown, which was a special presentation on the Elysian Fields. And it's a fascinating presentation having to do with a certain artifact that he came across, and how he expanded that into major research. And now the Origins Committee and members of our own committee are involved. It's Origins Committee led, but the members of our own committee are also involved in a pretty massive undertaking of redefining the Elysian Fields, or enlarging our knowledge of the Elysian Fields. So next month, John's presentation will be on the Elysian Fields, and that's on January the 10th. And I want to thank Dan and Bob for doing this and thinking this up. And I want to remind everyone that we are going to, in a month or two, be soliciting for our next season for our presentations. And also, again, I want to mention the Frederick Iver Campbell Conference coming up in April. It's I think going to be pretty special this year. We have some new things going on. And I want to acknowledge Len Levin here tonight and his chapter, the Southern New England chapter of SABR. We just completed our 19th century Southern New England SNE 19th century baseball interdisciplinary symposium up in Providence, Rhode Island last month. And it was really a fascinating presentation. We had some really extraordinary presenters from the Rhode Island School of Design and the executive director of the Rhode Island Historical Society and others. And of course, some of our baseball people presenting. So it was really a nice affair, and a very nice facility, by the way, which was Rhode Island College, right in kind of suburban Providence. So anyway, and thank you, Len, for everything you did to help us put that together. Your guys are fantastic. Joanne was giving a thumbs up. She was there. Okay. Well, thank you very much again. And we'll see you again, of course, at least on January the 10th. And our newsletter, which Bob puts out like clockwork every 3 months. That newsletter will come out with all of the information about the Fred. The newsletter will come out just around the 1st of January when Fred registration begins for the Frederick Iver Campbell Conference. Okay, thank you all again, and look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Dan, and
Great.
thanks
Yeah,
for
very
everybody
good.
for coming by.
Excellent presentation.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you. Very
Good job.
kind.
Yeah, I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Don't forget that. Bye-bye.